I go, you go, we go, bingo!
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring Harrisonburg, Virginia. You're interested in the arts and culture scene there, and I've got to say, the sources you provided, well, they have me intrigued. We've got this local podcast called Bingo is Life. And no, it's not actually about bingo. And the website for Ruby's Arcade, which looks like way more than just your average pizza and games joint. What do you think? Could these two seemingly random things actually reveal the heart of Harrisonburg's creative scene?
Well, that's the question we're going to try to answer. What's fascinating to me right off the bat is how Bingo is Life describes itself, an opus of absurdity. I mean, that's not your typical tagline for a podcast, let alone one recorded live at an arcade after a bingo game show. Does that give us any clues about the Harrisonburg mindset?
Okay, hold on. So we've got this podcast recorded live at Ruby's Arcade after a bingo game show. And they call themselves an opus of absurdity. Am I getting that right? This already sounds like my kind of town. But seriously, is that just a quirky marketing ploy, or does it speak to something deeper about the local humor?
I think it's worth digging into. They could be using humor to lower the barrier to entry, making local arts and culture more approachable, right? But the specific kind of humor, this self-aware absurdity, that's got to tell us something about the people who both make and enjoy this podcast. What do you think?
It definitely makes me want to listen and see what kind of jokes they're cracking. But before we get too deep into the Bingo is Life rabbit hole, let's zoom out for a second and talk about this arcade itself. Ruby's Arcade. They've got wood-fired pizza, classic arcade games, ping pong, pool, and duck pin bowling. I mean, I've heard of regular bowling, but duck pin, what even IS that? And why wouldn't an arcade choose that over regular bowling?
Duck pin bowling is like a smaller, quirkier cousin to regular bowling. Smaller balls, shorter pins, and a whole lot of fun. Choosing that over traditional bowling could signal a few things, don't you think? Maybe it's a nod to local history or tradition, or perhaps it's a way to stand out from the crowd and offer something unique. What stands out to you about this choice?
Honestly, the whole duck pin thing throws me off. It feels unexpectedly niche. Like, is Harrisonburg a hotbed of duck pin bowling enthusiasts? I'm picturing leagues, tournaments, heated rivalries, all centered around duck pins. Or maybe it's just a fun, quirky thing they decided to do because, hey, why not? Do we get any sense from the website about the kind of people they're trying to attract?
That's a great question, and something we should keep in mind as we explore further. They do mention hosting events and catering to large groups. Could this duck pin bowling be a way to attract a specific demographic, like families or groups of friends looking for something different to do? Or are they casting a wider net, hoping to appeal to those with a more offbeat sense of fun?
So we're starting to get a picture of Ruby's Arcade as more than just a place to play games. They've got the food, the events, this unexpected duck pin bowling. It's starting to feel like a community hub, a place where people can connect and just hang out. Does that vibe match what we're seeing with Bingo is Life so far?
Absolutely. Remember, they record that podcast live at Ruby's right after a bingo game show. So not only is the arcade a place to play, but it's also a venue for local entertainment. And if the podcast is this opus of absurdity, as they say, it stands to reason that the atmosphere during the recording is probably pretty lively and interactive.
Okay, so we're seeing this overlap between Ruby's and Bingo is Life starting to take shape.
Yeah.
But let's dive back into the podcast for a minute. You mentioned they have guests on. Who are some of the folks they've had on? And what did that tell us about what they're trying to do with the show?
Well, they had Steve Weingart on recently. You might know him. He's a stuntman who's worked on some pretty big action films.
Wait. The Steve Weingart, the one who had his face run over by a car during a stunt. I vaguely remember reading about that, talking about dedication to the craft. But what's a Hollywood stuntman doing on a Harrisonburg podcast recorded at an arcade? That seems like a random connection.
It's not as random as it might seem. Remember, we're trying to figure out what this all tells us about Harrisonburg. So the question is, why would Bingo is Life choose a stuntman as a guest? Is it just for the shock value? Or is there something more to it?
Okay, I see what you're getting at. They're not just pulling random names out of a hat. They're choosing guests who in some way reflect something about Harrisonburg.
Yeah.
So what's the Steve Weingart connection?
Well, aside from his stunt work, he's also an actor, ski instructor, bar manager, and a play director. He's actually directing 12 Angry Jurors at Court Square Theater in Harrisonburg. Does that shed some light on things?
Whoa, hold on. So we've got a Hollywood stuntman who's also a ski instructor, bar manager, A&D, a play director, and he's directing a play in Harrisonburg. That's kind of amazing, actually. But what does that tell us about Harrisonburg? Are they just desperate for talent, or is there something about the town that attracts these multi-talented people?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It could be a combination of factors. Maybe there's a strong sense of community that encourages people to wear many hats and explore different creative outlets. Or perhaps there's a certain openness to the unconventional, a willingness to embrace those who don't fit neatly into any one box. What do you think?
I'm starting to think Harrisonburg is way more interesting than it appears at first glance. So we've got this multi-talented stuntman director guy, a podcast recorded live after a bingo game show, and an arcade with duckpin bowling. It's like a weird fever dream, but in the best possible way.
Yeah.
What else can you tell me about this Bingo is Life podcast? Who else have they had on?
Well, they've also featured Ingrid DeSanctis and Ben Lambert, both theater professionals with impressive resumes. And it turns out they have a personal connection to one of the podcast hosts, Chris Howdyshell. Years ago, a tree fell on Ingrid and Ben's house, and that led to an introduction to their neighbor, Chris. Talk about a meet-cute. From there, friendships blossomed, plays were staged, and backyard get-togethers eventually led to a podcast appearance.
So it's not just about big names or flashy resumes. It's about showcasing the people who make up the fabric of Harrisonburg's art scene. I'm sensing a theme here.
Exactly. Bingo is Life seems to be highlighting the interconnected nature of the community, the way personal connections can spark creative collaborations. It's not just about who you know, though, is it? What about the talent itself?
Well, speaking of talent, they also had Frank and Janet Marshman on the show, described as another Harrisonburg power couple. They're artists who apparently offer a glimpse into the town's history on the podcast. Do they represent a different side of Harrisonburg's art scene?
That's a great question. If Steve Weingard represents this high-energy, multi-hyphenate artist, maybe Frank and Janet offer a more grounded historical perspective. Are they keepers of the flame, so to speak? If Bingo is Life is trying to paint a complete picture of Harrisonburg's creative landscape, showcasing artists with deep roots in the community makes sense, doesn't it?
It's like they're creating a living archive of Harrisonburg's artistic history. A&D, its current pulse. But hold on, it's not just about established artists, is it? They also had Brooke Imber on a recent episode. She's an art teacher who, according to the podcast, sees artistic possibilities everywhere. So are they also looking to the future of Harrisonburg's art scene?
Absolutely. Nurturing the next generation of artists is crucial for any thriving arts community. By showcasing someone like Brooke, Bingo is Life is highlighting the importance of mentorship and education, wouldn't you say?
So if we take a step back and look at the big picture, it seems like Bingo is Life is more than just a funny podcast. It's almost like an oral history project, a love letter to Harrisonburg's arts scene past, present, and future. Do you think that's intentional, or am I reading too much into it?
I don't think you're reading too much into it at all. They're definitely curating a specific narrative with their guest choices, one that celebrates community collaboration and the diversity of Harrisonburg's creative spirit. And it's not just about the guests themselves, is it? It's about the conversations they're having and the stories they're sharing.
Right. And let's not forget the whole recorded live at Ruby's Arcade after a bingo game show thing. That's not your typical podcasting setup. Does that factor into the narrative too?
I think it's a huge part of the narrative.
No.
The fact that they're recording in this lively, unconventional setting reinforces their commitment to community engagement. It's not just about listening to a podcast. It's about being part of an experience. Does that remind you of anything we've discussed about Ruby's Arcade itself?
It totally does. Remember how we were talking about how Ruby's is more than just an arcade? They've got the food, the events, the duckpin bowling. It's all about creating a space where people can come together and connect. It's like the podcast and the arcade are feeding off each other's energy, creating this symbiotic relationship that's at the heart of Harrisonburg's art scene.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. They've both tapped into something really special, a shared desire for connection and playfulness. And by weaving that into their DNA, they've become more than just a podcast and an arcade. They've become integral parts of the community itself.
So it's not just about the art, the games, or even the bingo. It's about the people and the connections they forge. It's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome to participate, to create, and to just have fun.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that creativity can flourish in the most unexpected places. Who would have thought that a bingo-themed podcast and an arcade with duckpin bowling could reveal so much about a town's cultural landscape?
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, isn't it? The more we dig, the more interesting and complex Harrisonburg becomes.
And speaking of complexity, there's one detail from Ruby's website that I keep coming back to, their menu. They've got a Bang Bang burger and a pizza called the Master Chief. What do you make of those choices? Are they just trying to be quirky? Or is there a deeper connection to Harrisonburg's culinary scene that we're missing?
Those names definitely stand out, don't they? Bang Bang Burger has got a certain ring to it. And the Master Chief, is that a video game reference? Are they catering to a gamer crowd with that one?
It's possible, but it could also be a nod to local tastes or ingredients. Maybe there's a specific type of pepper or sauce that's popular in the area, and the Bang Bang refers to that. Or maybe it's a play on a local dish or tradition, the Master Chief Pizza. Does that use local meats or cheeses? Is there a Harrisonburg twist on a classic pizza that we're not aware of?
You're right. We can't just assume it's all about being quirky. There could be these subtle nods to local culinary traditions that we're missing. It's like how they chose duck pin bowling over regular bowling. Maybe they're trying to stand out, but maybe they're also tapping into something that's uniquely Harrisonburg.
And that's what makes this so fascinating. We're piecing together a puzzle, using seemingly random details to reveal a larger picture of Harrisonburg's cultural landscape. And the more we explore, the more we realize how much thought and intention goes into every choice, from the guests on a podcast to the names on a menu.
So to sum up, we've got this amazing convergence of community, creativity, and, dare I say, quirkiness, all happening in this little town in Virginia. But what does it all mean? What does it all mean? That's the question, isn't it? We've gone from a quirky podcast and an arcade with duckpin bowling to this whole exploration of Harrisonburg's cultural identity. It's almost like we've stumbled onto a secret society of creative weirdos hiding in plain sight. Is that too dramatic?
Maybe a little dramatic, but you're onto something. What we've uncovered here speaks to the power of local culture, the way seemingly small choices can ripple outwards and shape a community's identity. Think about it. Bingo is life. Could have been just another podcast. Ruby's could have been just another arcade. But by embracing the unique, the quirky, the unexpected, they've become something much more. They've become reflections of Harrisonburg itself.
So instead of trying to fit into some preconceived notion of what an art scene should be, they're doing their own thing. And in doing so, they're attracting people who are drawn to that authenticity. It's like they're saying, this is who we are, take it or leave it. And people are taking it.
Exactly. They're not trying to be all things to all people. They're leaning into their strengths, celebrating their quirks, and creating something that's both unique and deeply resonant within their community.
It's like they've cracked the code of community building, haven't they? They've figured out that it's not about following trends or trying to be something you're not. It's about embracing what makes you different, what makes you special, and sharing that with the world.
And that's a powerful message, isn't it? It's a reminder that true creativity comes from within, from a deep understanding of who you are and what you have to offer. It's about being unapologetically yourself and inviting others to join you on that journey.
So for you, listening, what stands out to you as the most unexpected or surprising aspect of Harrisonburg's cultural landscape? Is it the opus of absurdity that is Bingo is Life? The allure of duckpin bowling? Or is it something else entirely?
What would you explore first if you found yourself in Harrisonburg? Would you be drawn to the eclectic energy of Ruby's Arcade, eager to experience the Wheel of Fate and the Skulls of Destiny firsthand? Or would you seek out the quieter corners of the town, the historical echoes whispered by artists like Frank and Janet Marshman?
So to sum up, we've got this amazing convergence of community, creativity, and, dare I say, quirkiness all happening in this little town in Virginia. But what does it all mean?
I think it comes down to this. They understand that embracing the local, the unique, the even absurd aspects of their town is what makes them stand out, you know?
So they're not just trying to be like every other artsy town.
Exactly. They're leaning into what makes them different, celebrating their own version of creativity.
And it seems like it's working right now. We're intrigued and we're not even there.
Right. It makes you want to go experience it for yourself, doesn't it? See what this Bingo is Life and duckpin bowling is all about.
Yeah, totally. So what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think it's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected places can hold the most interesting stories and the most vibrant communities.
And that embracing what makes you unique can be a powerful way to connect with others.
Exactly. So the next time you're looking for something different, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper and explore the unexpected.
You never know what you might find.
And you might just discover a whole new side of yourself along the way.
That's it for this deep dive into Harrisonburg. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
See you on our next adventure.